Hello everybody, yes, Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 online gameplay. This time around we will be on Charnel Valley playing as the Force of the Dowie in a friendly 1v1 against the Dark Elves led by BlackIron Battles. And for those of you who do not follow his channel, be sure to check him out. I'll be leaving a link down in the description below. Great guy, has lots of fun content, both for Warhammer as well as, especially, I believe, nowadays focuses on Blood Bowl, but a lot of Warhammer stuff. Lots of fun to be had there. But regardless, these were a series of practice games we did. We were testing out the Dwarf versus Dark Elf matchup, and so we're trying to figure out, in a tourney setting, what the Dwarfs can do. I was helping BlackIron Battles prepare a little bit. And it's definitely a tough match. Keep in mind that in tournaments, one of the things that you can do in a quick match that you can't do in tournaments is spam a lot of miners. And this is actually a huge boon in a quick match because you can have a huge, wide line of basically just straight miners that allows you to go super heavy on shooting. In tournaments, you're much more restricted. I believe you can only have 5 miners max, including blasting charges. And that, of course, limits your potential or your opportunities there. So for the build here, Charnel Valley, fortunately, a pretty narrow map and sort of congested map. So somewhat ideal for the Dowie, though there is a lot of potential for your opponent to flank you either up here, or if you deploy up on the high ground, your opponent can swing around low ground, which can definitely be rough for the Dwarves. But I figured, you know what, let's try to make a build that can counter everything the Dark Elves can throw at you, at least in some capacity. For my Lord here, we are rolling with the Rune Lord, and this guy is very important. Simply, he's cheap, and he does give you some crowd control with the Rune of Wrath and Ruin. Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin does a lot of damage, can melt elite infantry, such as executioners, but it can also control things like chariots, which are brutal in this match. You can have a tournament legal build that includes Malekith and 4 Cold War chariots, which is insane. It's very difficult to deal with for the Dowie. And so even having that one little bit of control is very useful. Now, besides that, our front line, pretty cheap, but we did bring 2 Longbeards here as a bit of an elite anchor. A few chevrons because we had some gold left over, so they are there to soak up some damage. On the flanks, there are Dwarf Warriors. These guys will still out-trade lower-end Dark Elf infantry, which is very important, being able to beat down those filthy Dread Spears, Bleak Swords, that sort of thing, which you will occasionally see. And they will hold up units like, say, Black Ark Corsairs or Witch Elves relatively effectively. Behind that, we do have multiple units of miners. You can see the backline mostly composed of miners. We do also have one of your Dwarf Warriors is screening for a unit of miners with blasting charges to help us sort of disrupt the enemy push. Blasting charges is very useful if you can get a good amount of them, but even one unit is better than nothing. They can melt Witch Elves, Sister of Slaughter, which, believe it or not, are a pretty solid pick in this match. They trade pretty well with Dwarves just because of their high melee defense, so that's pretty nifty. Now, besides that, we do have 3 units of cannons. Now, this is partially because I don't want to be forced to push. If, for example, BlackIron had gone with a Dark Reaper build, I don't want to have to deal with, a Reaper Bolt Thrower build. I don't want to have to deal with that. So the cannons will win any artillery duel against bolt throwers. They'll even win against high elf bolt throwers pretty handily. But much less the short range Dark Elf ones. And they'll give me the offense. They'll make it so that I'm the one attacking. And because of that, I don't have to advance with my army. They are also going to be able to do a lot of damage to enemy cavalry. Cold One Riders, not the rarest thing ever. Cold One Chariots, they'll decimate. And if push comes to shove, they can do some damage to infantry as well. Besides that, we do have quite a firing line here. 2 units of Thunderers, good point defense. These guys can really delete basically any unit the Dark Elves can throw at you. And they are backed by a single unit of Iron Drakes with Troll Armor Torpedoes because you really need that chariot defense. And while I can whittle chariots down a bit with artillery, while I can whittle them down with guns and slow them down with the Rune Lord, I ultimately will need some point defense, and the Iron Drakes are great for that. They also, one of the things that normally matters with these guys is their short range makes them vulnerable to enemy shooting, but in this situation, Dark Elf shooting also has very bad range, so they'll be bit more resistant. Finally, up in this, guys, we do have 2 gyrocopters with steam guns. They're doing a bit of a reconnaissance flight here. One of the important reasons for these guys is that, one, they can melt cheap or the squishy Dark Elf infantry. So Sisters of Slaughter, Bleak Swords, units like that. They'll even destroy Hargoneth Executioners when they blob up into melee fight. But more importantly, they actually give you mass. And with the mass, I can block up enemy chariot play. I can prevent my opponent from pushing through. Now, in this situation, BlackIron actually went with a very wide infantry-centric build. You can see here he has brought a Supreme Sorcerer of Fire. She does have a Fireball as well as a Cascading Fire Cloak. And you can see immediately my cannons opening fire on her. A few shots also going into the Dark Shards here, who he brought to try to gun me down. And this is not a bad move. Dark Shards with shields, of course, can actually outshoot Dwarven infantry. They've got silver shields. The third armor doesn't really matter when both sides have AP, like in the case with Thunders. And they're pretty mobile, all things considered. They can get Murderous Prowess to proc, gives them more AV range damage. Definitely a potent unit. Now for the front line here, BlackIron has brought a bunch of Bleak Swords as well as Corsairs. Good to soak up the hits. And in a melee fight, I believe Bleak Swords will lose to Dwarf Warriors, but BlackIron Corsairs will be able to beat Dwarf Warriors, which is definitely an advantage. Now on the flanks, BlackIron has brought Hardgenic Executioners looking to sort of bunker bust, as well as some Witch Elves to potentially dart into my backline, shut things down, disrupt my artillery, disrupt my gunners, and that sort of thing. Finally, there are, in fact, 3 units of Dark Riders with repeater crossbows. And these guys might seem like an iffy pick, but you know what? Against Dwarves, you can often make use of Missile Cavalry despite its short range, by just flanking around. The Dwarves do take a while to respond. You can see my artillery here is taking pot shots at these guys, because one of the things I figured is, if BlackIron's noticed that I'm shooting him, he's going to juke around with the Supreme Sorcerers. So I can leave one cannon, perhaps, to keep shooting at her. And in the meantime, the remaining cannons can focus on other units, and that can't dodge. So these Dark Riders are taking some hate there. K-Knight Assassin is also on the ground. He does have his Dark Venom as well as Assassin's Trophy. Assassin's Trophy, pretty nasty. If he hits my Rune Lord with it, he could potentially goon me out, which I'm definitely not thrilled about. In the meantime, though, the cannons are punishing this cavalry, and you can see as they blob up, they're losing immense amounts of manpower. You can see already down about 33% of their HP on 2 units. Definitely some brutal stuff, and BlackIron does dart around here. He probably should have stayed up on the high ground, but he's taken an absolute bludgeoning there. In the meantime, the Supreme Sorcerer Fire does fire off a fireball. For those of you who don't know, this will kill a cannon, and you can see the fireball just homing in here, flying clear across that berm, and smack dab onto that cannon, immediately destroying it. The thing is, this is why we got 3 cannons. Even if BlackIron knocks out a gun, he's gonna run out of Winds of Magic before he kills my cannons, essentially. And every time he stops to fire, the cannons are going to shoot back at him. And now you can see the front lines are engaging here. The Dwarf Warriors pushing forward. Longbeards pushing forward. The Longbeards will beat down these BlackIron Corsairs. And this is, in my opinion, a misplay. So, one of the things here that you probably don't want to do, in my opinion, you want to get your Bleak Swords in on the Longbeards because you're going to lose that fight anyway. And try to get your BlackIron Corsairs in on the flanks. You want to surround. Get in on the flanks. In the meantime, get her Hardgenic Executioners on the cheap troops. The Dwarf Warriors. And butcher them. Now, unfortunately here, although the Dark Shards are firing in on my Thunders and definitely doing quite a bit of work, we are able to sort of flex around. We've got our Miners here. We are able to drop a Rune of Wrath and Ruin on these Hardgenic Executioners. Over here, the Dwarf Warriors are going to engage on these slightly beat up Hardgenic Executioners, and the Steamy Gyros are going to start boiling some Elves here. And the Dark Elves definitely don't hold up to that too well. The cannons, in the meantime, we do have more of them firing away here, chipping away at the Supreme Sorceress. She's taking an absolute pounding and having a terrible time of it. She tries to push in. I'm not entirely sure why she was pushing this close, but she gets a bit too close for comfort, and it's going to take a massive volley there. Trollhammer torpedoes arcing up into the sky. Those Dwarven Panzerfaust just decimating her. And in the meantime, in the backline, Slayers ready to zone away this cav that's trying to get into me. Over here, the Witch Elves are in fact going to get on top of my Thunders. You can see they're beating up little Trollhammer torpedoes, staying in there and fighting before trying to retreat. We do pull our final reserves. One of the nice things, though, so my opponent's Hardgenic Executioners out here have been getting steamed. They've gotten shot a bunch. They're really beat up. Now, they will beat the Miners, but a little too late. In the meantime, the Miners here intercepting the Sisters, and they're getting decimated. And the Cannonball's now destroying them. My opponent is now without leadership. BlackIron is definitely suffering from that. And the Miners are just plowing through the center here, going after those Dark Shards, and really pressuring them off. Over here in the pits, the Rune Lord focused down by Assassin's Trophy, but he's just an absolute champion of the people, holding things up. And Dark Riders here, a bit of a moment of distraction there for BlackIron. The Dark Riders are sort of getting too close and getting caught up in a melee fight. Same thing over here. The Slayers get in there, and they are going to butcher these Dark Riders with pure crossbows. This is not where they want to be in life, and you can see they're going down like 9 pins. They just don't stand a chance. This is really not what you want your Dark Riders, let's be honest. Over here on the flanks, in the meantime, the Steamy Gyros are melting these troops. The Sisters of Singing Doom, as well as the Hardgenic Executioners, can't hold up. Look at these guys, 18 and 18. That's not a crazy kill count. But keep in mind, this is against some elite troops. This is against Hardgenic Executioners, Witch Elves. And if we're able to break them off like this while their Murderous Prowess is up, that is huge, because it means BlackIron can't get value out of that moment of buffage. Elsewhere, you can see my Rune Lord running for dear life as the Dark Shards, or the remaining Dark Shards, are firing away. But Trollhammer torpedoes here pounding on the Hardgenic Executioners, who are sort of being locked up by the Miners. Definitely not where they want to be in life. Miners are breaking, and certainly the front line is being breached. You can see the Witch Elves rallying in the distance and coming back in, but at this point it's a little too late. You can see the Slayers coming back in. Even if the artillery crew gets taken offline here, it's going to be too little. You can see the Hardgenic Executioners here getting decimated by Trollhammer fire, just not able to close the distance. Trollhammers are devastating to basically every unit in the game. Yeah, we are losing a few. Actually, we haven't even lost a model yet. These dark shards. Witch Elves are coming back, so we're going to dismount the cannon and run away. Slayers coming in to engage. Slayers will decimate those Sisters of the Singing Doom in a straight-up fight. They're definitely much more geared to demolish units like this. Sisters rout. And a Chain Shatter occurs for BlackIron battles, and that is going to be it. So Pyrrhic victory for the Dawi. Now, this was one of several games we did. We took turns playing Dark Elves as well as the Dawi. And this was one of the builds that we had a lot of issues sort of figuring out what in a tournament setting works for the Dwarfs to beat the Dark Elves. And this was one of the builds that we found works relatively well. Now there were a few misplays on BlackIron's part, and we discussed these actually after the fact. Obviously, the Dark Riders getting caught out was a bit rough, but in my opinion, one of the things you really don't want to do. So my elite troops, quote unquote elite. Now Longbeard's obviously a bit of a mid-tier troop, but my elite troops were in the middle of my formation. And in my opinion, if you know you're going to lose the fight, so whether you engage with Black Corsairs or Bleak Swords, you're going to lose to the Longbeards. It doesn't matter. So in my opinion, what you want to do is you want to engage the Longbeards with the Bleak Swords, tie them down, bog them down in a fight, and then flank around with the Black Corsairs. You want your elite soldiery to be able to sweep around, get potentially into my backline. So what I would have said, I think this was one of the core mistakes BlackIron made here, was simply deployment. Hard Gunnery execute. In my opinion, you want to take the Bleak Swords to take on the elites, because they're going to lose. You're going to lose that unless you overinvest with Hard Gunnery Executioners, but you could get an easier win somewhere else with Hard Gunnery Executioners. So in my opinion, you tie down the Longbeards, get the Hard Gunnery Executioners to beat down the Dwarf Warriors, and then sweep around the flanks with Black Corsairs and the Witch Elves, because they're faster, they're nimbler, they will destroy miners, they will destroy Dwarf Warriors relatively effectively, and plus the Dwarf Warriors are probably getting butchered by Hard Gunnery Executioners, and then you can just compromise the backline, destroy the Slayers, destroy the shooting, all that stuff. So that was, in my opinion, a bit of a misplay there on BlackIron's part. Another problem, of course, running the Supreme Sorceress a bit too close, where she got shot down. That said, as far as turning builds go, I think this is a decent Dwarf build. You need a good amount of shooting to stop the Dark Elves, because Dark Elves can bring some nasty builds and some very varied builds. Malekith is a very likely choice, but not the only choice. You can see Supreme Sorceresses spamming Fireball at you. You can see mass shooting builds with Dark Shards, which are pretty nasty. You can see Shade play in this matchup. Sometimes you will see builds that involve a bunch of Black Corsairs, Sisters of Slaughter, tiny anchor of Hard Gunnery Executioners with maybe the Regiment of Renown, Blades of Blood Queen in there as well. And then say just Malekith on a chariot and a few Light Cav and Harpies. Or you can see 4 chariots and Malekith. There's a lot of disgusting builds that you might face here as Dawi, and you got to prepare for all of them. So this is kind of a build I found works reasonably well. The Longbeards give you a little bit of staying power. Dwarf Warriors also give you okay staying power. You can't bring too many miners anyway, so 4 instead of 5 is a decent amount. It can slow down and speed bump against units like Bleak Swords, against units like Black Corsairs. Even a Hard Gunnery Executioner will get slowed a little bit. And finally, we've got all these Thunders and the Trollhammer Torpedoes, the Gyrocopters. These guys will decimate enemy infantry, and the Trollhammers and Thunders can also double up against Chariots. If you need to deal with Chariots, you've got your Rune Lords to slow them, you've got your Slayers to slow them, you've got your Gyrocopters to dive in there if needed and block them with their bodies. You got Cannons, which can whittle them down. If you can even kill one Chariot before he gets into range, that can make all the difference in the world. That makes life much easier, makes it much easier to control and destroy your opponent, in my opinion. Even if it's just one Chariot you get down. If you can get more than that, even better. But let's say your opponent brought 4 Chariots and Malekith. You destroy one of those Chariots before... You probably don't want to focus Malekith because he'll be dodging. But you destroy one of those Chariots with cannons. Just one. We're not even talking getting... And you might be able... On a map like this one, on like Charnel Valley, where you've got a lot of open space, you might be able to knock down 2. But let's say you knock down 1 Chariot. You focus fire 1 Chariot, or really knock down 1 and like a half. Now you've got 2 gyros that can still body block 2 Chariots out. Still got Rune of Wrath and Ruin and your Slayers to control another Chariot. And you've got all this shooting to potentially knock them down one by one. And that's a huge difference. That can make all the difference in the world, just being able to deal with 1 Chariot less. And of course the cannons double up to destroy enemy artillery pieces, which you don't want. You don't want to be forced to attack as the Dawi. Ideally, you just don't want that. I don't necessarily think this build BlackIron brought here. We were definitely experimenting with some stuff. For example, the Assassin, definitely a bit of an experimental thing. Not necessarily what you want. I think the Assassin is just a bit subpar. But The build wise, besides that, it's a decent sort of mass shooting build, and this is definitely one of the things you might potentially see. Otherwise, there are definitely more frustrating things with chariots or Sisters of Slaughter, but definitely one of the builds you might face, and the build held up relatively well. So regardless, we'll play the BlackIron here. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you have any comments, criticism, questions, don't hesitate to post them down below. Be sure to check out BlackIron's channel. I will be leaving a link in the description and comment below. So be sure to pop over and say hi for me. If you have any requests, anything of that nature, be sure to leave them down, and I will do my best to respond as soon as I can. I do thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Wyvern out.